The blood on my hands wouldn't wash away. I scrubbed frantically at the sink in the dilapidated ranger cabin, but the crimson stains seemed to mock my efforts. Outside, something howled, not like a wolf, not like anything natural. The sound carried a human understanding of suffering, a calculated malice that made my spine turn to ice. My name is Robert, and 3 days ago, I was just a wildlife photographer looking to capture the ethereal beauty of Yellowstone's geysers under moonlight. Now I'm fighting to survive until dawn, hunted by something that shouldn't exist. It started with the footprints. Not animal tracks, not human ones either. Something in between. I discovered them while setting up my tripod near Old Faithful, waiting for the predicted eruption. The full moon hung low and swollen above the tree line, casting the steaming landscape in a ghostly blue glow. The crowds had long departed. The only sounds were the bubbling of thermal pools and the occasional distant call of nighttime birds. The first footprint was enormous, easily twice the size of my boot, with elongated toe impressions ending in what looked like claw marks punched into the hardened mud. I followed them, camera in hand, thinking I'd discovered some unknown species. What a fool I was! The tracks led away from the boardwalk into a section of the park marked "Closed for geological instability." The warning signs should have stopped me, but the photographer in me couldn't resist the opportunity. I climbed over the barrier and continued following the tracks, which seemed to grow fresher, the indentations deeper, as if whatever made them was growing heavier. Then I heard it, a wet, tearing sound accompanied by ravenous growls coming from a small depression ahead. I crept forward, using trees for cover, and peered into what appeared to be a dried-up thermal pool. The sight that greeted me froze my blood and nearly stopped my heart. A park ranger, or what remained of one, lay splayed across the cracked earth. His torso had been ripped open, ribcage splayed outward like bloody wings. Crouched over him was something. In the moonlight, I could make out a massive, hunched form covered in matted fur. It wasn't a bear. The proportions were all wrong. The shoulders too broad, the back legs too long, bent at an angle that suggested it could stand upright. As if sensing my presence, the creature's head snapped up. Its muzzle dripped with gore, and its eyes, its eyes, glowed yellow in the darkness, reflecting the moonlight with unnatural intensity. Those weren't animal eyes. There was intelligence there, and malevolence. I didn't think. I ran, crashed through undergrowth, vaulted over fallen logs, splashed through shallow thermal streams that burned my ankles. Behind me came sounds of pursuit, not the four-legged gallop of a wolf or bear, but something bipedal, something fast. The snapping of branches, the heavy breathing that sounded almost like laughter. Somehow I found my way to this abandoned ranger cabin, tucked away in a wooded area far from the main tourist pass. I barricaded the door with a heavy desk and have been hiding here ever since, listening to it circle the cabin each night, testing the windows, scraping at the walls with claws that sound like steel against the wooden siding. It's toying with me. It could break in if it wanted to. Sometimes it speaks, not in words, but in horrible approximations of human sounds. Last night it mimicked a woman crying for help, then a child's laughter, then my own voice calling out in fear. I've been rationing the meager supplies left in the cabin, some bottled water, a few protein bars, but they won't last much longer. Neither will the battery on my satellite phone, which hasn't been able to connect to any signal since I arrived. It's as if something is blocking the transmission. The sun is setting now. Soon it will return. I've fashioned a makeshift weapon from a broken chair leg, but I know it won't be enough. The monster outside isn't just an animal, it's something ancient, something that knows exactly what it's doing. Tonight, I'll try to make a run for it. There's a ranger station about 5 miles from here, according to the faded map on the wall. If I can reach it before the creature catches me... Wait, something's moving outside. I can see a shadow passing by the window. It's earlier than usual tonight. The scratching at the door has started again, more insistent this time. And now a voice, a perfect imitation of human speech. "Let me in, Robert. It's getting cold out here." "How does it know my name?" The voice continued, sounding eerily human yet subtly wrong, like someone speaking with their tongue swollen. I saw what you did to Mike, Robert. You left him behind. Friends don't do that. I hadn't told anyone my name since arriving at Yellowstone 3 days ago. And who was Mike? I didn't know any Mike. Then it hit me, the ranger's nameplate. The dead man in the thermal pool had been named Mike. You could have helped him, Robert, but you ran, like a coward. My hands trembled as I gripped the improvised weapon tighter. The creature was playing mind games, trying to draw me out or break my resolve. I'm not what you think I am, the voice continued, softer now, almost reasonable. I'm just hungry. It's natural. You eat animals too, don't you, Robert? A terrible scraping sound came from the roof. It was climbing up there, testing for weaknesses. Dust and small debris filtered down from the ceiling as heavy footsteps moved across the old shingles. I needed to think. The map on the wall showed several thermal areas nearby. If I could make it to one of the larger geyser basins, perhaps the boardwalks and open ground would give me some advantage. The creature seemed to prefer the woods, the shadows. A loud crack from above made me jump. A section of the ceiling sagged dangerously. Claws punched through the roof material, then withdrew. It was testing, probing. I grabbed my backpack, stuffing it with the remaining water and food. If I was going to run, it had to be now, before the thing broke through completely. I eyed the window opposite the door, small but maybe large enough for me to squeeze through. Moving quietly, I crept toward it, unlatching it slowly to minimize noise. The scratching on the roof intensified, covering the sound of my movements. I pushed the window open and looked out. The forest beyond was dark, but I could make out a faint trail winding away from the cabin. I had one leg through the window when the ceiling finally gave way with a tremendous crash. I didn't look back. I heard the heavy thud of something large landing on the cabin floor, heard an enraged howl as I tumbled out the window and hit the ground running. The forest was a blur around me as I sprinted down the trail, moonlight filtering through the trees, providing just enough illumination to avoid the largest obstacles. Behind me came sounds of destruction as the creature burst through the cabin wall rather than use the window or door. Then came the pursuit, fast, gaining. Not the four-legged run of a wolf, but the rhythmic pounding of something running on two legs, occasionally dropping to all fours for bursts of speed. The trail forked ahead. Left led deeper into the forest. Right seemed to descend toward what might be a thermal area. I could see steam rising in the distance, illuminated by moonlight. I chose right, hoping the open ground might give me some advantage. The path opened onto a surreal landscape, a nighttime thermal basin dotted with steaming vents and bubbling mud pots. Wooden boardwalks crisscrossed the area, providing safe passage over the dangerous, thin-crusted ground. I raced onto the nearest boardwalk, the weathered wood creaking beneath my pounding feet. I chanced to look back and immediately regretted it. The creature had emerged from the tree line and stood upright, its form fully visible in the moonlight. It was massive, at least 7 feet tall, with the basic shape of a wolf but standing on two legs. Its front limbs hung too long, ending in hands, not paws, with curved, gleaming claws. Its chest was broad, powerfully muscled beneath matted dark fur, slick with what looked like blood. The head was the worst part, a wolf's skull, elongated and enlarged, with a mouthful of teeth too numerous and too long to fit properly, some jutting outward like a deep-sea predator. But the eyes were human, intelligent, aware. It saw me looking, and its mouth stretched into something like a smile. "Nowhere to run now, Robert," it called, its voice a guttural approximation of human speech. "Thin ground here. Dangerous for both of us." It was right. The boardwalks existed because the ground in thermal areas could be perilously thin, with scalding water or mud just below the surface. One wrong step could mean breaking through into boiling pools. I continued along the boardwalk, making my way toward the center of the basin, where several walkways intersected. If I could keep the creature on the opposite side of a thermal feature, maybe I could work my way around to the far side of the basin and back to the forest. The creature paced at the edge of the boardwalk, seemingly reluctant to follow me onto the narrow wooden path. It sniffed the air, growled, then began moving around the perimeter of the basin, paralleling my route, but keeping to more solid ground. It was hurting me. As I reached the intersection of boardwalks, I realized my mistake. The paths here spread like spokes from a central viewing platform, but several were blocked off with repair signs. I had only 3 viable escape routes, and the creature was moving to cut off 2 of them. I chose the third path, sprinting across the platform and onto a boardwalk that led toward a large, steaming pool. As I ran, the wooden planks beneath my feet grew slick with condensation from the rising steam, forcing me to slow down to avoid slipping. Behind me, the creature had finally committed to the boardwalk, its weight making the entire structure shudder with each step. The sound of splintering wood told me the aged planks were struggling to support its mass. I reached the edge of what appeared to be a large, gently bubbling hot spring. The water was crystal clear but deep blue, indicating extreme depth and heat. Steam rolled off the surface in thick clouds, reducing visibility to mere feet in some directions. The boardwalk continued around the perimeter of the spring, eventually connecting to another path that led back toward the forest. If I could make it around, a sudden violent tremor shook the entire boardwalk, nearly throwing me into the scalding water. It wasn't the creature this time. It was the ground itself. The thermal basin was experiencing some kind of disturbance. The bubbling of the hot spring intensified, the water beginning to churn. "It's waking up," the creature called through the steam, its voice somewhere behind me. The beast beneath, bigger than me, older. Another tremor, stronger this time. Part of the boardwalk ahead collapsed as the ground beneath it simply fell away, creating a new, violently boiling mud pot where solid ground had been moments before. I was trapped between the advancing werewolf and a section of collapsed boardwalk, with nothing but scalding water on either side. The creature emerged from the steam like a nightmare materializing, moving slowly now, confident in its trap. It stood upright, towering above me, saliva dripping from its partially open jaws. "No one will find your bones, Robert," it said almost conversationally. "They'll think you fell in. Happens every year. Tourists who don't respect the power beneath." Another tremor rocked the basin, more violent than before. The boardwalk swayed dangerously. Cracks appeared in the ground near the shore, venting new plumes of steam. The creature hesitated, looking around as the disturbance grew more intense. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in those human eyes set in a monster's face. The hot spring beside us had stopped bubbling entirely, a sign I recognized from the guidebooks. Before certain large eruptions, the water goes still as it's drawn down into the underground chambers. "We need to move," I shouted at the creature. "This whole section is going to blow." The werewolf snarled, torn between its prey and the growing danger. Another violent shake decided it. The section of boardwalk between us broke free from its moorings, tilting precariously. I turned and ran back the way I'd come, as behind me the hot spring erupted with a deafening roar. Scalding water shot hundreds of feet into the air, the unexpected geyser eruption sending a wall of steam and boiling water in all directions. The creature's howl of rage turned to one of pain, cut off abruptly as the deluge engulfed it. I didn't look back, focusing only on reaching solid ground before the entire boardwalk system collapsed. Somehow I made it to the tree line as chaos consumed the basin behind me. New thermal features were violently birthing themselves across the area, the ground heaving and splitting. The night had become hell, steam, boiling water, and the smell of sulfur overwhelming my senses. I staggered through the forest, lungs burning, legs threatening to give out at any moment. I had no idea if the creature had survived, but I couldn't afford to assume it hadn't. I needed shelter, somewhere to hide until daylight. After what seemed like hours, I stumbled upon a maintenance shed half hidden among the trees. The padlock on the door was old and rusted. It broke easily when I struck it with a rock. Inside, I found basic tools, a first aid kit, and most precious of all, a radio. My hands shook as I turned it on, praying for a signal. The static that greeted me was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. "Emergency, attack, Barrel Spring Basin." I gasped into the receiver, hoping someone was listening. "Danger, evacuate." Whether anyone heard or understood my broken transmission, I couldn't tell. The radio crackled with static, occasionally catching fragments of other communications. Routine check-ins between ranger stations, it seemed. I slumped against the wall, exhaustion threatening to overwhelm me. My body was covered in minor burns from the geyser's spray, my clothes soaked and smelling of sulfur. But I was alive, for now. Outside, the night had gone quiet again. Too quiet. No insects chirping, no distant calls of nocturnal birds. Nothing but the faint hissing of steam vents in the distance. I dozed fitfully, jolting awake at every small sound. The shed had no windows, just a single door that I'd barricaded with whatever I could find. A sliver of moonlight crept through cracks in the roof, providing the only illumination. Hours passed. The temperature dropped further. My wet clothes clung to me, leaching warmth from my body. I began to shiver uncontrollably, teeth chattering. Then I heard it, a soft scratching at the door. Not forceful, just gentle, exploratory. Like someone running their fingernails lightly across the wood. "I know you're in there, Robert," came the voice, weak but unmistakable. "I'm hurt." "You were right about the eruption." I said nothing, holding my breath. "I need help," it continued, voice cracking in a convincing simulation of pain. "Please, I'm changing back. I can't control it when the moon is full, but it's setting now. I'm becoming human again." The scratching stopped, replaced by what sounded like a body sliding down to sit with its back against the door. "My name is Daniel," the voice said, sounding more human than ever. "I was a geologist studying the thermal features. Something bit me 3 months ago while I was taking samples at night. I woke up covered in blood." A pause filled with labored breathing. "I don't remember what I do when I change. I just wake up after, with evidence of what happened. I've been trying to stay away from people, hiding in the backcountry. But the hunger..." Another long pause. "I'm dying, Robert. The water was too hot. 3rd-degree burns over most of my body. I don't want to die alone. Even monsters fear dying alone." The voice sounded so genuinely human, so filled with pain and regret, that for a moment I almost believed it, almost opened the door. Instead, I picked up a hammer from among the tools scattered across the floor. If the door opened, I'd be ready. "You're smarter than the others," the voice said, a new edge creeping in. "They believed me, opened their doors, offered help. That ranger, Mike, he radioed in that he'd found an injured hiker, came right to me with a first aid kit." A sound that might have been a laugh, might have been a sob. "The sun will be up soon," it continued. "I really am weaker in daylight, you know. The legends get that part right. I won't die, but it's harder to hold this form, harder to control the hunger." Light was indeed beginning to filter through the cracks in the roof. Not sunlight yet, but the graying of pre-dawn. I stood, muscles screaming in protest after hours of inactivity, and gripped the hammer tighter. "I'll find you again," the voice promised, all pretense of humanity dropping away. "Tonight, or the next full moon, or the one after that. I have your scent now, Robert. I'll always be able to find you." Silence followed, broken only by what might have been footsteps moving away from the shed. I waited, counting my heartbeats, unwilling to trust that it had truly gone. When the first genuine rays of sunlight pierced the cracks in the roof, I cautiously moved the barricade and opened the door a crack. The forest outside was empty, peaceful in the dawn light. Birds had resumed their calls and a gentle breeze stirred the pines. I stepped outside, hammer still in hand, and surveyed my surroundings. The shed was positioned on a small rise, providing a view of the nearby basin where I'd encountered the creature. In daylight, the damage was evident. New thermal features scarred the landscape. The boardwalk system was largely destroyed, and steam rose from dozens of new vents. Movement caught my eye. Not in the forest, but down in the basin. People, a group of park rangers and what looked like emergency response personnel examining the destruction. Relief flooded through me. Civilization. Help. I began making my way down toward them, waving my arms to attract attention. One of the rangers spotted me and pointed, several of them changing direction to head my way. As they drew closer, I rehearsed my story in my mind. What could I tell them? The truth would sound like the ravings of a madman. I'd have to modify it, make it believable. A bear attack, perhaps. A thermal eruption that I barely escaped. "Sir, are you all right?" called the first ranger to reach me, a young woman with concern etched on her face. Are you injured? I'm okay, I managed, my voice hoarse. There was something attacked me, near Barrel Spring, then the whole area erupted. More rangers arrived, one bringing a thermal blanket which he wrapped around my shoulders. They asked questions, who I was, how long I'd been out here, what had happened. I gave them the sanitized version. I'd been taking night photographs when I was attacked by what I thought was a large wolf. I fled, the basin erupted, and I found shelter in the maintenance shed. They seemed to accept this, attributing any inconsistencies to shock and exposure. They told me there had indeed been a major thermal disturbance overnight, with several new geysers forming and significant damage to park infrastructure. Thankfully, the area had been closed to visitors due to previous minor activity. As they escorted me toward their vehicles, one of the rangers mentioned something that made my blood run cold. You're not the first one to report unusual animal activity in this area recently. We found the body of one of our rangers yesterday, Mike Collins. Animal attack, worst I've ever seen. I stumbled, nearly falling. They hadn't found Mike's body in the thermal pool, where I'd seen him killed. The creature must have moved it, perhaps to use as... I couldn't finish the thought. And this morning, the ranger continued, oblivious to my reaction, a backcountry research scientist was found badly injured about a mile from here. Daniel Blackwood. Severe burns over most of his body. He's been airlifted to the hospital in Jackson, not expected to survive. Daniel, the name the creature had given. Did he say what happened to him? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The ranger shook his head. Unconscious when we found him. Burns consistent with someone who fell into a hot spring, though we can't figure out how he got out again. Those pools are like death sentences if you fall in. We reached the ranger vehicles and they helped me into one of them. As we drove away from the basin, I looked back at the forest edge one last time. There was nothing there, just trees and morning shadows. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of hungry eyes following my departure. The hospital in Jackson Hole was modern and well-equipped, staffed by professionals used to treating everything from skiing accidents to wildlife encounters. They treated my minor burns, determined I was suffering from exposure and dehydration, and admitted me for observation. From my hospital bed, I gave statements to park authorities, repeating my sanitized version of events: a large wolf or possibly a bear, the thermal eruption, finding shelter. They nodded sympathetically, told me I was lucky to be alive. When they left, I asked the nurse about the other patient brought in from Yellowstone, Daniel Blackwood, the severely burned researcher. She hesitated, then told me he was in the ICU, heavily sedated and in critical condition. Will he survive? I asked, needing to know if the creature, or the man it claimed to be, was still alive. Hard to say, she replied. Burns over 70% of his body. If infection doesn't set in and his organs hold up, maybe, but it would be a long recovery. That night, alone in my hospital room, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow seemed to move. Every creak of the building sounded like claws on wood. The rational part of my mind insisted I was safe, surrounded by people, miles from Yellowstone, with the creature badly injured if the ranger's report was accurate. But another part, a primal part that had awakened in the forest, refused to be soothed. It whispered that hospital walls wouldn't stop it, that the distance meant nothing to something that could track by scent, that injuries that would kill a human might merely slow the monster. I must have eventually drifted off, because I awoke suddenly to find a doctor standing beside my bed, checking the monitors. The room was dark except for the equipment lights, the doctor's face shadowed. Sorry to disturb you, he said quietly. Just checking your vitals. Everything looks good. Something about his voice made the hair on my neck stand up. You're not my doctor, I said, reaching for the call button. His hand shot out, inhumanly fast, catching my wrist. No, I'm not, he agreed, leaning closer. In the dim light, his eyes caught the glow of the monitors, reflecting it back with that same unnatural yellow luminescence I'd seen in the forest. Just wanted to see how you were recovering, Robert, he said, his voice now recognizable as the one that had spoken outside the shed. I'm healing too, faster than they expected. They're calling it a miracle. I tried to pull away, but his grip was like iron. "You can't be here," I gasped. "You're in the ICU, sedated." He smiled, teeth too white, too sharp even in his human form. "I was, but pain medication doesn't work quite right on me anymore, and restraints need to be much stronger than standard issue." A nurse passed in the hallway, visible through the small window in the door. The man, Daniel, immediately released my wrist and straightened up, assuming a professional posture. When she had passed, he leaned in again. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, sounding almost reasonable. "Not yet. I just wanted you to know that I meant what I said. I will find you, wherever you go." "What happened between us? It's not finished." "Why?" I managed to ask. "Why me?" He tilted his head, considering. "You saw me, the real me, and you escaped. No one escapes." He glanced toward the window, where the waning moon was visible in the night sky. "Besides, I'm curious about you. You're resourceful, smart. Most people panic, make stupid mistakes. You didn't." He moved toward the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "The moon will be full again in 27 days. By then, my burns will be healed." "Where will you be, I wonder? Back home? At work? With family?" The threat hung in the air between us. "They'll be watching for you here," I said, finding my voice. "The Rangers know about you now." Daniel's smile widened, becoming less human. "They know about Daniel Blackwood, the injured researcher. They're very concerned for his recovery, so much so that they've arranged a medical transport to a specialized burn unit in Denver. Tomorrow morning." He opened the door. "Get well soon, Robert. Our game isn't over. It's just moving to a new location." And then he was gone, the door closing silently behind him. I lunged for the call button, pressed it frantically. When a different nurse appeared, I told her someone had been in my room, someone claiming to be a doctor. She checked the corridor, found no one, and gently suggested it might have been a dream, a side effect of the medication they'd given me for pain. But I knew better. I'd been marked by something ancient and patient, something that would follow me home like a shadow. The next morning, I checked myself out of the hospital against medical advice. I told them I needed to get back to my life, that I felt fine, that I'd follow up with my regular doctor. The truth was, I couldn't bear to be in the same building as the creature, even if it was being transferred elsewhere. As I left the hospital, a medical transport helicopter was being prepared on the landing pad, presumably for Daniel Blackwood's transfer to Denver. I caught a glimpse of medical personnel loading a heavily bandaged figure on a stretcher, monitors and IV lines surrounding them. One of the figure's hands was visible, extending from the bandages. As I watched, the fingers flexed, then formed a clear gesture, a wave directed right at me. I turned away and ran. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of paranoia and preparations. I returned to my home in Seattle, but it no longer felt safe. Nothing did. I took an extended leave from my job as a wildlife magazine photographer, citing trauma from the animal attack. I changed my phone number, deleted social media accounts, and started researching remote locations where I might disappear. Every night I dreamed of yellow eyes watching me from the darkness. Every day I jumped at shadows and flinched at the sound of scratching. I bought silver, knives, bullets for the gun I'd acquired through less than legal channels, even powdered silver to mix with other materials. I had no idea if the old legends were true, but I wasn't taking chances. 25 days after my encounter in the hospital, I received a small package at my apartment. No return address, just my name written in an elegant hand. Inside was a single item, a park ranger's badge caked with dried blood. Pinned to it was a note that read, "2 more days, will you run or fight?" I ran, packed a bag with essentials, withdrew all the cash I could from my accounts, and drove east, away from the coast. I had no destination in mind beyond away from cities, away from people who might become collateral damage, away from the familiar paths of my life that the creature could follow. By the time the full moon rose the next night, I was in a small motel in eastern Idaho, nearly 500 miles from Seattle. I'd paid cash, used a false name, and parked my car behind the building, out of sight from the road. The room was sparse but defensible, 1 door, 1 window, both of which I'd reinforced with chairs and makeshift alarms made from empty cans and fishing line. The silver knife lay under my pillow, the loaded gun on the nightstand. I sat in the dark, blinds drawn, watching the digital clock tick over to midnight. The moonlight filtered through the thin curtains despite my efforts, casting the room in a pale, ghostly glow. Nothing happened. Minutes stretched into hours. I maintained my vigil, jumping at every sound. The ice machine down the hall, a car passing on the distant highway, the building settling in the cool night air. Dawn came, finding me still awake, still clutching the gun with white-knuckled hands. I'd survived the night. Perhaps I'd overestimated the creature's abilities. Perhaps it couldn't track me over such distances. Perhaps it had been bluffing all along. Or perhaps it was simply playing with me, extending the hunt for its own amusement. I slept through most of the day, exhaustion finally overcoming fear. When I woke, the sun was already setting, the second night of the full moon approaching. I decided to move again, to push further east, putting more distance between myself and whatever might be pursuing me. I checked out of the motel as dusk fell, throwing my bag into the passenger seat of my car. As I slid behind the wheel, I noticed something on the driver's seat, a single dark hair, too coarse to be human, too long to be from any common pet. My blood ran cold. It had found my car, which meant it had found me. It had been here, possibly while I slept. I drove recklessly, speeding along back roads, making random turns, doubling back, anything to confuse a potential pursuer. Night fell completely, the full moon rising to illuminate the landscape in that same ghostly light I'd come to dread. The road ahead wound through forested hills, far from any town or settlement. My gas gauge hovered just above empty. I'd need to find a station soon, or risk being stranded. The thought of breaking down on this isolated stretch of road, with darkness all around and the creature potentially close behind, made my palms sweat on the steering wheel. A sign ahead indicated a gas station at the next exit, 2 miles ahead. I pressed the accelerator, eager to reach it before my tank ran dry. The exit led to an even smaller road, barely more than a track through the trees. No streetlights illuminated the way, just my headlights cutting through the darkness. After a mile of tense driving, I spotted the promised gas station, a single small building with 2 ancient pumps standing like sentinels in the forecourt. A flickering neon open sign provided the only indication that the place wasn't abandoned. I pulled up to the pumps, got out, and started refueling, constantly scanning the tree line surrounding the small cleared area. The night was unnaturally quiet, no insects chirping, no distant traffic sounds, just the mechanical click of the fuel pump and my own too rapid breathing. As I finished refueling, movement caught my eye, a shadow detaching itself from the deeper darkness beneath the trees. I dropped the pump handle, reaching for the gun tucked into my waistband. "I wouldn't," came a familiar voice. Daniel Blackwood stepped into the pool of harsh fluorescent light cast by the gas station overheads. He appeared completely human, a man in his 40s, tall and lean, with dark hair shot through with gray at the temples. He wore casual clothes, jeans, boots, a flannel shirt under a leather jacket. Only his eyes betrayed his true nature. Too intense, too predatory. "You're a long way from Denver," I said, hand still hovering near my weapon. He smiled, showing normal human teeth. "The burn unit was excellent. I'm a fast healer." He gestured at his face and hands, which showed no signs of the severe burns he'd supposedly suffered. "As for finding you, you underestimate what I've become. Once I have a scent, distance means nothing." He took a step closer. I took one back. "The gun won't help you," he said conversationally. "Even if you managed to shoot me somewhere vital, it wouldn't be enough to stop me. Not under the full moon." "The bullets are silver," I bluffed, having had no way to actually create such things. Daniel threw his head back and laughed, a normal human laugh that somehow made him seem more monstrous than any growl or snarl could have. "Silver? Really? Did you bring garlic and holy water too?" He shook his head, still smiling. "You've been watching too many movies, Robert." He began moving laterally, circling around the pump toward me. I circled in the opposite direction, maintaining the distance between us. "What do you want?" I demanded. "Why follow me all this way? Why not just kill me in the park or at the hospital?" He considered the question, head tilting slightly. At first, I was just going to kill you. You'd seen me after all. But then you survived the geyser basin. Clever move, by the way. And I became curious. Most people, they just run until they can't anymore. But you, he pointed at me, an appreciative gesture. You think, you plan, you adapt. So this is, what, some kind of sick game to you? No, he said, expression growing serious. It's an evaluation. Before I could process what he meant, he began to change. Not the full transformation I'd witnessed in the park, but a partial shift. His eyes glowing that unnatural yellow, his fingers elongating into claws, his features becoming sharper, more predatory. The thing about being like me, he said, his voice deeper now, rougher, is that it gets lonely. Humans are prey. Animals are animals. I need someone who understands what it's like to walk between worlds. The implication hit me like a physical blow. You want to turn me, I said, the words barely audible. His smile showed teeth that were now decidedly not human. The bite doesn't always take. Most die, but I think you'd survive it. You have the right qualities. In one fluid motion, I drew the gun and fired. The shot was deafening in the quiet night, the flash momentarily blinding. When my vision cleared, Daniel was no longer standing where he had been. A low chuckle came from behind me. I whirled, but too late. He moved with impossible speed, knocking the gun from my hand with a casual swipe that felt like being hit by a truck. I stumbled backward, colliding with the fuel pump. Silver or not, that was rude, Daniel said, examining a hole in his jacket where my bullet had passed through. There was no blood, no wound, just unmarked skin visible through the torn fabric. I'm offering you a gift, Robert. Power, freedom, immortality of a sort. You're offering me murder, I spat back. Becoming a monster. His features shifted further, bones cracking and realigning beneath his skin. We're all monsters in some way, he growled, voice becoming less human with each word. Humans destroy everything they touch. At least I'm honest about my nature. I glanced around desperately, looking for any weapon, any escape route. The gas station building stood 30 feet away, its windows illuminated, but I'd seen no attendant during my fueling. Was someone inside who could help? Or had Daniel already ensured we wouldn't be interrupted? As if reading my thoughts, he gestured toward the building. The night attendant is taking a very long nap in the back room. He'll wake up with a headache and no memory of me. I didn't kill him. See? I can be merciful. He lunged forward suddenly, faster than I could react, grabbing me by the throat and lifting me off my feet. His hand was changing even as it held me, fingers elongating, nails hardening into claws that pricked the skin of my neck. I've decided, he said, eyes now fully transformed into those glowing yellow orbs, that I'm not giving you a choice anymore. The hunt was fun, but I've made up my mind. You're perfect, strong, smart, resourceful, the ideal pack member. Pack member. The words chilled me even more than the claws at my throat. There were more of them. With my oxygen restricted, black spots began to dance at the edges of my vision. In desperation, I remembered the gas pump, still inserted in my car, the nozzle dripping fuel onto the concrete. With the last of my strength, I reached into my pocket for the lighter I always carried, a habit from my days as a smoker. My fingers closed around the metal case as consciousness began to fade. Daniel must have sensed my movement because he looked down, saw the lighter in my hand, and understood my intention an instant too late. I flicked the wheel, producing a flame that seemed blindingly bright in the darkness. "Don't," he started to say, loosening his grip enough for me to twist free. I dropped to the ground, sucking in precious air, and tossed the lighter toward the spreading pool of gasoline beneath my car. The flame caught with a whoosh, racing along the fuel trail toward the pump. Daniel roared, a sound no human throat could produce, and began his full transformation, body contorting hideously as fur erupted from his skin. But even his supernatural speed wasn't enough to escape what came next. The explosion was deafening, a concussive wave of heat and pressure that threw me back 20 feet. I landed hard, rolling across the concrete as flames engulfed the area where we'd been standing. My car, the pump, and the fully transformed werewolf were at the center of an inferno that lit up the night like a second moon. Through the flames, I saw something impossible, a burning figure, more wolf than man, staggering toward me. Its fur was alight, skin blackening and peeling away to reveal muscle beneath. Yet still it came, driven by inhuman determination. "You can't kill me," it howled, the words barely recognizable through its transformed vocal cords. "Not with fire, not with silver. I am eternal." Each step seemed to cost it tremendously, its movements becoming jerky, uncoordinated. It collapsed to its knees 10 feet from me, still reaching out with burning claws. "Even if you destroy this body," it gasped, "I will find another." The spirit moves on. Always has, since the first humans cowered around their fires, fearing the dark. The creature, I could no longer think of it as Daniel, convulsed violently, its body beginning to break apart as the flames consumed it. Yet its eyes, those terrible yellow eyes, remained fixed on me, aware and hate-filled to the end. 28 days, it rasped, its voice now barely audible over the roar of the flames. "When the moon is full again, look for me in a new skin. The hunt never ends." With a final shuddering gasp, the creature collapsed, its body seeming to disintegrate into the fire, leaving nothing but ash swirling in the heat. I staggered to my feet, ears ringing from the explosion, body aching from the impact. The gas station building had caught fire now, flames licking up its wooden walls. I needed to get away, to find help, to warn someone, though who would believe me? Stumbling toward the road, I flagged down the first vehicle I saw, a truck driver who reacted with appropriate shock to my appearance and the inferno behind me. He called emergency services while I collapsed in the passenger seat of his cab, my mind struggling to process what had just happened. Had I killed it? Truly killed it? Or was its final threat real? Would it return in a new form when the moon was full again? The next few days passed in a haze of hospital rooms, police interviews, and sleepless nights. The official story became that I'd been caught in a gas station accident caused by a faulty pump. There was no evidence of anyone else having been present. No remains, no DNA, nothing to suggest I hadn't been alone when the explosion occurred. I told a sanitized version of events to the authorities. A stranger had threatened me. There had been a struggle. The gas had somehow ignited. They seemed skeptical but had no evidence to suggest I was lying. Eventually, they chalked it up to shock and possible head trauma, affecting my memory of the incident. As the days passed and the full moon waned, I began to wonder if perhaps it had all been some form of delusion, a psychological break triggered by my original experience in Yellowstone. The rational part of my mind insisted that werewolves couldn't exist, that Daniel Blackwood had been a disturbed human with delusions of his own, perhaps, or a figment of my traumatized imagination. But then the dreams began. Vivid, terrifying visions of running through forests on all fours, of hunting, of tasting blood. I would wake gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat, my body aching as if I'd actually been running all night. And there were the blackouts, periods of hours, sometimes an entire night, that I couldn't account for. I would find myself miles from home with no memory of how I'd gotten there. Dirt under my fingernails, scratches on my body that I couldn't explain. 26 days after the gas station explosion, I found a dead rabbit on my doorstep, its body torn open with surgical precision, organs arranged in a pattern that seemed almost ritualistic. No wild animal would have done this. It was a message, a warning, a promise. On the 27th day, I checked into a remote cabin in the mountains of Montana, miles from the nearest neighbor. I'd brought restraints, chains, padlocks, industrial-strength cable ties. If what I feared was happening to me was real, I wouldn't allow myself to become the monster that Daniel had been. I would contain it, control it, or die trying. I secured myself to a support beam in the basement of the cabin as sunset approached, the restraints tight enough that no amount of human strength could break them. A camera set on a tripod would record whatever happened, providing evidence, whether of supernatural transformation or mental breakdown. As twilight deepened into full darkness, I felt the first pangs, Not pain exactly, but a profound discomfort, as if my skin had become too small for my body. My senses sharpened dramatically. I could hear mice scurrying in the walls, smell the pine sap from trees hundreds of yards away. The full moon rose, its light filtering through the small basement window, falling across my restrained form. When the first moonbeam touched my skin, the change began in earnest. It was agony beyond description. Bones breaking and reforming, muscles tearing and regrowing, skin stretching to accommodate a new shape. I screamed until my vocal cords transformed, the sound becoming something inhuman, a howl that echoed through the small basement. The restraints, designed to hold a man, strained against something much stronger, much larger. Metal links stretched, then snapped. Cable ties shredded like paper. In moments, I was free, but I was no longer myself. The creature that rose from the basement floor retained nothing of Robert except the most basic memories. A vague sense of identity submerged beneath overwhelming new instincts. Hunger, territory, hunt. Using claws and strength I didn't know I possessed, I tore through the basement door, then the cabin's main door, emerging into the moonlit forest beyond. The night welcomed me, every shadow suddenly clear, every scent telling a story. For hours, the creature that had been Robert rampaged through the forest, hunting smaller animals, marking territory, reveling in its power and freedom. But as the moon reached its zenith, something unexpected happened. I began to remember, not just who I had been, but the warning Daniel had given me. The spirit moves on. With that memory came understanding. Daniel hadn't infected me with lycanthropy through a bite or scratch. He had never touched me with that intention. The infection had been more insidious. His spirit, his essence, transferring to me as his physical form was destroyed. I wasn't becoming a werewolf. I was becoming him. The realization gave me strength, not physical, but mental. Deep within the monster, Robert fought back, asserting his humanity against the invading consciousness that sought to subsume it. The battle was internal, but no less brutal for it. The creature stumbled through the forest, howling in confused rage as two minds fought for control of one body. Memories clashed, Robert's childhood in Seattle overlapping with someone else's memories of 19th century Europe. Robert's love of photography competing with bloodlust and the thrill of centuries of hunting. Near dawn, the creature that was both Robert and not Robert found itself at the edge of a cliff, overlooking a deep ravine. The eastern sky was beginning to lighten, the full moon setting in the west. Soon the transformation would reverse, leaving a human body. But which mind would control it? The invading consciousness, Daniel, though that hadn't always been his name through the centuries, fought viciously, projecting images of power, of endless nights of hunting, of freedom from human constraints. Robert countered with memories of connection, of purpose, of the beauty he'd captured through his camera lens. The sun peeked over the horizon, its first rays touching the transformed body, initiating another painful metamorphosis. As bones cracked and fur receded, the mental battle reached its climax. The creature dropped to its knees at the cliff edge, claws digging into the rocky ground, howling one last defiant cry that echoed across the valley. Then silence. A naked man knelt where the monster had been, breathing heavily, body covered in sweat and dirt. He raised his head, looking out at the sunrise with eyes that reflected the light normally. No unnatural glow, no predatory gleam. "I am Robert," he whispered, voice hoarse from screaming. "Only Robert." But even as I said the words, I knew it wasn't entirely true. I had won this battle, pushed the invading consciousness down, contained it, but not destroyed it. I could feel it lurking in the recesses of my mind, waiting for the next full moon, waiting for me to weaken or surrender. I stood on shaky legs, human again, but forever changed. Whatever Daniel had been, werewolf, spirit, ancient evil wearing human skin, part of him was now within me, and would be until I found a way to exorcise it completely. As I made my way back to the cabin, I noticed the camera still recording on its tripod, having captured everything. Evidence, as I'd intended, but now more valuable as research. If I was going to fight this, control it, perhaps eventually cure it, I needed to understand it. 27 more days until the next full moon. 27 days to prepare, to strengthen my mind, to research ancient legends and modern science for anything that might help. The hunt continued, but the roles had changed. Now I was both hunter and hunted, predator and prey, human and monster. The Werewolf of Yellowstone wasn't gone. It lived in me. But as I gathered my resolve, watching the rising sun paint the Montana mountains in gold, I made a vow. This would be the last generation of the curse. Whatever it took, whatever price I had to pay, I would end it, even if ending it meant ending myself.